Okay, it is 8:30 straight up, and welcome to another session of Introduction to Corrections. I had to pause because I'm teaching so many classes now. Introduction to Corrections. This is week number 6. Week number 6. And so I'm going to spend some time talking to you, roughly the next 45 minutes to an hour, but no longer, about some things that I've observed in your assignments and preparing you for next week, because there is no lecture week 7. And as you will know, should know, week 7 is when your next portion of your project is done. There's a couple of you, not too many, that I haven't graded your week 4, but I will be finished with those within the next couple of days. So no later than Friday you'll have those. But again, week 7 is a totally different assignment for that, and I'm going to talk about that at the end. And so I'm going to go back, and let's start by sharing my screen. Here we go. Okay, move that little mug of me up there. Okay, so now you see the information that I have constantly been saying the whole quarter about the importance of rubrics. See how highlighted rubrics are. APA is also very important, as well as critical thinking in your papers. Grammarly goes without saying. And then I provide resources for tutoring, as well as the information that will help you. So it's important so that you can deal with items like APA and things of that nature. Okay? Now, going down, your rubrics are in each written assignment. We'll go over those in a few. But again, reminding you that your next lecture after today will be week 8. So after today, we only have 2 more lectures. That shows you how far we are into this. And again, for those of you who still wonder sometimes what are the requirements for your project or course project, you can go to this link right here, and it will take you to the week 1 lecture. And the week 1 lecture will tell you in detail, again, the requirements for the remaining sessions of the for the course project. Because we did week 2, we finished week 4, we have week 7, and then it's just one more, which is week 9. So I will be posting the recording. Now, I want to tell you this, that you will see an announcement that I posted in another class, and I'm posting it now because what happens, I got a new computer, and when the college issued me my new computer, it didn't transfer my recorder for WebEx, even though, I mean, I can record the sessions, but I can't take the sessions and save them and convert them over. So that's going to be taken care of tomorrow. So you will get the actual lecture for week 6 if you're not able to make it today. Okay, so let's go over and let's see our announcement for the week. Remember, there was a special announcement that you'll see a little later this evening. So we're talking about the prison experience, male versus females. As you know, prison is one of the 4 sections that or areas of corrections. It's jails, prison, probation, and parole. Those are the only 4. And that's who you're doing your project on. I've made that abundantly clear, and I continue to remind you guys about it. But I also want to remind you that before I get back to the announcement is, please make sure you conduct research. Make sure that you do provide citations in the body and references at the end. Now, there are other requirements such as Roman 12 point. Make sure you have a cover page. Your cover page should be properly formatted. You can use Noodlebib to help you with that as a resource under the Resources tab. And you can also go to the writing guide here, and it will help you as well. But APA is so important. It's so important. We've been talking about it since week 1. And then you, like I said, the cover sheet, and there should be a separate reference page. And by the way, your references should reflect the same thing that's in the body of the paper, citations. Citations for the same information, they should match up. You can use references more than once as a citation, but you definitely want to at least use it 1 time. That's for sure. Okay. So now, having said that, going back to my week 6 announcement, I sent you the PowerPoints for chapter 6, 8, and 11 of the text that cover this topic that we're dealing with. And the activities, classification, myth versus fact, and then some thoughts for a prison lieutenant. We will have those presented to you at the end of this session so that you will have them. Now, let me point out to you again, your discussion assignment, which you guys have been doing pretty well, need to be posted timely. They need to be content-oriented. Demonstrate that you've given some thoughts. You didn't just throw together something real quick. I respond to several, and sometimes I will ask you a question. And sometimes I will post a general post myself. But most of the time I will reply to yours, and some of you do reply to my post. So this week, it's issues unique to female inmates. And I've looked at those, and you guys are doing very well with that. So those were due last night by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and then Saturday by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Always remember that when I talk about time, I'm always talking about Central Standard Time, whether you see it or not, because that's where I'm located. And so finally, there are 2 written assignments in addition to that. Now, they both require citations and references. It tells you what the pagination requirements, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. 3 issues in male prisons is 1. Male prisons today. And then Stanford Prison Experience, which involves a video that you will see when you complete that assignment. And again, these are due Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay. So, and I've already talked to you about my motto. So let's go right to the calendar. Let's take a quick look at the calendar. Okay, I'm going to go this route to do the calendar this time. Let me move this down. Move yourself down here. Okay. There we go. Okay. Let's take a look at the calendar. And I need to check the box, which means there it is right there. Okay, now there it is. So this is where we are this week right here. Your reading assignment, again, if you click on that, it tells you what sections to read. And then actually there's more than these sections here. Okay, so it's 3, 6, 3 and 6. It says actually it's not that, but the ones that are involved with the chapters, along with your discussion posts. And then this is your live lecture, which is taking place right now. And then moving that up there, your reply posts due Saturday. And then your 2 written assignments are due on the 10th by 11:59 p.m. And then next week, I'm going to talk about that just before I do the lecture, before I show you the interview with the lieutenant. Your reading assignment for the following week is here. And then, of course, you see that on the announcements as well that are posted every week, your initial post and your reply post. And then your written assignment and course project interview. Now, that is week 7 on the 17th. And I'm going to talk about that so you can make sure. I'm not going to talk about the written assignment, but I am going to talk about the course project again to reiterate to you what I am expecting you to do. And you're going to need to pay close attention to that. Okay, so now let's go back to, let's get rid of that there. Okay, let's go back to the module itself. Here we are. Again, here are the assignments with the accompanying rubric. 3 issues in male prisons today. In a 2, see how many pages is required? 2-page requirement. 2-page requirement. And you'll see this up here too. You're going to do these things. APA formatted, I've already talked about that. It is due Sunday. Here is the rubric, and the rubric will bear the same thing that I said. A 2-page paper that deals with these issues, all right? And it has to meet the 2-page. Paragraphs, not one long paragraph. Some students submit, a paragraph should be an average of 5 to 6 pages long. It could be longer, but an average. And should have an introduction and then get into the details of it. And then when you transition to another area, then you start a new paragraph. And so you want to make sure that you do that because you get graded for that. Sometimes I'm not very tough on it, but I will point it out to you. But I am very tough on this next part. Formatted with the title page and the reference page properly. And also in-text citations. And it says also properly formatted reference page. So of all resources that are relied upon in your paper, and that's in for your citations as well. And so that gets you a total of 25 points. You will lose 5 points right off the bat if you don't do citations and references. But how long have I been talking about that? Since week 1, okay? So that's that written assignment. That's the first one. All right, so now let's go back and let's look at the second one, which is the Stanford experience. Now, if you'll read it carefully, you'll ask me how many pages. 1 page is sufficient, but make sure you run your papers through Grammarly. Don't just copy and paste. And it tells you this is where you see the look at the website. And this is follow the slideshow and look at the video clips and then answer the following questions in essay form. Not 1, 2, 3, 4, but in essay form with citations and references Again, let's look at the rubric. It is due Sunday. And let's see what the rubric says. There is no conflict. I say a minimum of 1 page. And then you deal with these questions. These are the same questions that you saw in the module. Make sure they're paragraphs. And 1 to 2 page minimum. So if you do 1 paragraph, it's not going to satisfy it. In 1 page, you need to make sure that you're adequately answering those questions. And then, of course, citations and references. And then make sure you don't use Wikipedia. We've already abundantly made that clear. That's in every one of the modules, every one of the rubrics. And that's the assignments that are due for that. All right, very important that you get a hold to that. All right, so now let's go back. And again, come down. There's assignment 1, assignment 2, and then your discussions. All right. So now let's go to the section on the lesson content. Now, there are some issues that are different from males and females. Some classifications. You guys have done excellent work with providing me information that lays that out extremely well. Things that are in common, but then there are some things that are peculiar to females. And then there are different classifications for the crimes that the individuals take, the type of criminals that they are, as to how they are institutionalized. And also be aware that, as properly pointed out here, there are more and more females going to jail. And so there is a need, to, of course, to segregate the men from the women. And the other thing is this, is that you should be aware, and I've said this before in other classes I've taught, and I'll say it again here, that most of the females who are imprisoned are generally imprisoned for crimes that were committed with some man. In other words, some crime that they were involved with that leads these women into prison. And you know, so it's quite a bit of that. I represented many during the course of my criminal defense years, and saw many people when I was in law enforcement who were arrested, and it turns out that they were trying to protect some man, or they were involved with a crime to try to not influence, but to win that man over. Now, you can believe that's true, because it really actually happens. And then we're going to talk about some unique issues that relate to females, such as being mothers, their health care, sex exploitation, and then there's some other issues relating to mental health and things like that. And then we're going to examine the roles of employees in those prisons. Now, remember now, this week we are talking about prisons. Now, remember the distinction. We previously covered jails in week 4 and talked about the difference, but I want to bring back to you again that the difference in a prison and a jail is very simply pretty much the length of time and or the crime that the person commits. If the person is found guilty of a felony, they will spend time at prison, or they may get parole, not parole, probation. Of course, so if they go to prison and then they come out, then that's parole. But probation is in lieu of going into an institution. But prison is a longer term. It is generally not in a residential community. It is usually in the outskirts. There are some local ones. A lot of the federal ones they have local facilities, such as in Chicago, they have one. And individuals are there for a period of a year or more. And that's the difference there, okay? You can await trial in jail for over a year, but that doesn't mean you could end up ultimately not being convicted. Or if you are convicted, then you get credit for that time served, and they'll apply that to your prison term. So that's how that works. So anyway, we're going to talk a few minutes about classification, myth versus fact, some thoughts from a prison lieutenant. As I said, we're going to talk about that after I take you through covering the project for week 7. So pay close attention, and I'm doing that because there is no lecture, so that you will be again reminded. If you notice and pay attention, I'm looking very heavily at this project because it is beneficial to you in whatever area that you want to work in. So you're not doing just busy work, so that you can be prepared for when you do go out and apply for one of these positions, okay? So let's talk about the classification of prisons. Again, it talks about the fact that there are all kinds of programs that are available to individuals who are incarcerated in prison. Hopefully, the individual, if they're sentenced, and we relate to they have a drug or alcohol problem, and I'll repeat again that there is a very strong correlation between the use of drugs and alcohol abuse and crime itself. Generally, it's the drug issue, and what happens is people commit crimes to get the resources to satisfy their craving, or get the monkey off of their back, or so to speak, to feed what their body is crying out for. In other words, they don't have control. And so it is important that we recognize in prison that when individuals are incarcerated in those kinds of situations, that we get them treated, because you know what will happen? You can give them 10 years and it still doesn't matter. But if you don't treat that problem, when they come out, they will go back to the same thing, because you haven't dealt with the major issue, and that is the drug problem. I equate drug problem to a health issue, and I think it's a public health epidemic. Those of you who take my drugs and crime course will know more about that as I elaborate on that. So you can look down the road to that course. That is J115. Anyway, so the prisons have drug and alcohol treatment. Education, it is quite clear, as you continue to hear me say, it is cheaper to educate than to incarcerate. It is also more beneficial to society to educate than to keep long-term incarceration. Education has proven in my work experience that I've worked with many organizations, a program called Probation Challenge, where we work with individuals to help them to get their GEDs, and they have gone on, some of them, to college after that, and even further, and their whole direction in life changed. But education is the key. Education is the key, and that it gives individuals a desire to want to go and work in an area. Of course, though, with that, there are some organizations, some institutions that they're trouble getting in because of their criminal record, but that's why there are organizations now around, or many prisons now have partnered with organizations or companies for second chance programs to give individuals a chance to work and at the same time get their education. Job skill training. I know for a fact that in prison and in jail, but in prison as well, that there are barber colleges operating. I know of many individuals who have learned the craft of being a barber while incarcerated in prison, learning how to work on cars, become mechanics, even now learning to work on computers. And maybe even some of those people end up in IT, hopefully not as hackers, but you know, earning honest living in terms of their skills. But the job skill training is important. Again, an uneducated and an unemployed person will commit crime because the idea there is survival, to feed the family, to feed themselves, provide shelter, clothing, and so forth, and all the needs that we all have a desire for and need for. And so it depends on what facility you go to, what kind of facility you go to, what kind of crime, you know. So one of the things that happens is when individuals are incarcerated, they're immediately hoisted in a new kind of culture. And they have to oftentimes adapt to that culture, as referred to in here as prisonization. And what they do is they learn the language, they learn what it takes to survive. Unfortunately, some of these things are bad, and they associate themselves with gangs and other illicit activities because they survive in that kind of environment. There are not enough, I should say, guards or correction officers to adequately protect individuals from hurt, harm, and danger. So they adapt in order to survive. And so there's a lot of contraband issues and weapons that are found. You know what a shank is? That's a prison knife or jail knife that's made. And then, of course, there are drugs that are smuggled in various ways. Did you not know, and I had a case like this, of an individual who was a corrections, well, he was a jail guard, but could have been a corrections guard as well. Anyway, the individuals that were incarcerated, he brought magazines. And he'd get the magazines from a family friend of the individual, not some place he went and bought one. And so, as it turned out, he was violating the rules. But here's what I'm getting ready to say to you. The individual was getting drugs through the magazine. You might say, how? Very simply, chewing the pages that had been soaked in some kind of liquid drug that had dried out. And I'm just showing you some of the ways that has happened. And I represented this guy, and he didn't know. He was very innocent about it, but what he did was violate the policy of doing a favor or bringing in something, and he ended up in jail himself. So those kinds of things. So there are other ways. People get candy, and it's in there, even with gum. And then, of course, clothing and all other kind of issues there. So there are some things that begin to happen in prisons, dealing with two of the major problems in prison, sex and violence. And so the president in 2003, George Bush, signed the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which was supposed to provide training and information to inmates and staff. Now, let me say this to you with all due respect to the law. The law is only as good as the spirit of the individuals who apply it, if you understand what I'm saying. So just passing the law did not eliminate prison rape, because those people still had their needs. But the point of the matter is that they said it minimized it. The point of the matter is that when I remember when this happened, I shook my head and scratched it and said, how is that going to, these individuals are incarcerated already. They said, well, it's supposed to help staff to watch out for it. Well, sometimes it's staff who's doing it. And that's one of the issues that you are aware of, particularly dealing with females. But it can happen with males as well. And then the other aspect is the violence that takes place, because there are not enough staff members to properly monitor the individuals. Sometimes there's a very high staff to inmate ratio that makes it kind of difficult for the officers to perform their jobs adequately. So anyway, so there are assaults that take place continuously, and you hear about them all the time on individuals who work there and other inmates as well. And so it's hard for a staff member, as I said, to guard the individuals because of what I had stated earlier, the numbers. So many of these same issues apply to women, but women have additional problems. And one of the things is, of course, the fact that many are there for nonviolent crimes and are passive. Remember I said that they're involved as a co-conspirator or accompaniment of a person who commits a crime. And so that has caused numbers to go up as well. But some of the issues that women face are, number one, taking them away from their children and their family, and it also puts them in a position where the motherhood issue, and there are many women health issues that need to be attended to that are not attended to adequately when individuals are incarcerated. And there's programs to help, but it seems to be a big problem. And then the final thing is what I had said earlier, the sexual abuse problem. And the sad part about the sexual abuse problem is that it is sometimes the inmates themselves, but more prevalent than that is the assault of females by male guards. And male guards are you know, they take advantage of the females. And so it's some real serious problems to deal with male versus female in terms of dealing with the issues and problems that occur. Okay. Now let's look at here a few of these things. Let me run the Adobe Flash and allow. Should pop up in a second. There we go. Okay. So now these are things, this little piece that we're going to do right now involve myth versus fact. So inmates easily adjust to prison life. Do you think that? My answer is no. So I'm going to submit it. It says inmates easily adjust to prison life is the myth. What do I think? I think the answer is no, because of the fact that some of the problems I've talked about a few minutes ago. So then, contraband is rare. Contraband is not rare. Contraband is on the rise. Again, that's something that you should be aware of. I already talked about that. A myth. Most inmates are sexually assaulted, particularly when new to an institution. That is true, but also remember the sexual assault of inmates continue even after they've been there a while because of the guards themselves, particularly dealing in female prisons. So most inmates are sexually assaulted. Quite a few are. Quite a few are. Now, you know that law there I told you about will say, well, it has the numbers have decreased. Let me explain something to you. There are unreported, and then there are reported acts of sexual assault. Many are not reported at all for a number of reasons, such as retaliation, such as retaliation can come from the guards, from the correction officers, even from the warden. It can come from the inmates themselves. So you still got to stay there, particularly if one of them did it. Myth. Due to tight control, assaults are rare. We already threw that one out by what we talked about earlier. We know that that is not true. Prison guards enjoy their power and fight rehabilitation efforts. Well, that's not necessarily true, because more and more prisoners are subjected to prison guards that are more educated and prepared more professionally. In the past, the requirement, as you will hear, is a high school diploma, but that many prisons, most prisons, are moving toward recruiting and hiring individuals who have more education, the result more professional guards. And so rehabilitation is a movement that is recognized. And, you know, here's something that you should be aware of. There was an old adage that the guards didn't want to deal with rehabilitation because they operate and keep their jobs on the basis of what we call recidivists or repeat offenders. Well, that's not necessarily true. But and now, especially with the direction that many prisons and jails are moving in terms of hiring more educated guards or correction officers. Women are seldom sent to prison. You heard me already say that it's on the rise, and I explained to that. So that is a myth. The majority of female inmates are young and unattached. That is totally, absolutely false. One of the issues that most women face is that they are young, however, they are attached. They have children. They have other family members, and they're taken into an environment that is totally different from what they were in before. So that is false. And that's the end of that little exercise. So, and you know, so it appears that almost everything that they have here is myth, but then you might hear them say fact because of some of the laws that are passed. Okay, now this is watch the video, Thoughts from a Prison Lieutenant. Before we do that, I want to go to week 7, module 7, and I want to specifically go over the assignment. Not this one, not this one, but this one. Now, it is time for you, you know, you've gathered information, you've gotten your individual that you provided in week 2. You've got your information about the organization from week 4. So now it's time for you to actually do the interview. Now, the interview questions are not located in this module. The interview questions are, again, I'm going to go back because I'm going to take you back here. The interview questions are located here under lesson content. Coming down here, down, down, down to here. Here they are. Interview overview. These are the required 5 questions and 3 questions of your choice. Okay, very important. So there should be 8 questions. Now, I don't want them numerically. You can do them in paragraphs. Very, very, very important. So this fits into the interview. This is actually week 7 right here. This right here is more like week 4. Okay. But anyway, the key thing is this is where you're going to be with week 7. All right. So now let's go back to week 7, module 7. Let's go back to the assignment and let's scroll back down. Okay, so now this is APA. Now, pay close attention to what I'm about to say. This is an assignment that gives you a chance to communicate. It's due on the 17th, but look at the rubric. This is very important, and it tells you, you know, what issue, what the content, and so forth. But what I want to scroll down to is make sure they're in paragraphs, not, you know, don't do question 1. You can say that, but then give me paragraphs. Write about it. Answer the question. Don't give me short answers. Do not. It should be at least 2 pages long, people. Okay? Think about when you do an interview. Most interviews that you have seen don't just answer yes or no or give short answers. The person who's going to answer, they elaborate on it. And you're going to be like, they're going to be dictating, and then you're going to be taking the information down like a transcriber. Now, notice this. This requires APA with the title page, but this is the exception. That's why it's in bold print. References are not necessary for this assignment. Did you hear me? References. So there's no need for a reference page, but your citations in the body. And the citations should match up with who you're talking to. And, you know, if you go to APA, it tells you how to put in a answer to an interview question, how to put the citation in the body of it. And I'm going to be looking for it throughout that as well. Okay, so that is important, and so you get your 25 points. That is it for week 7. That is as clear as I can give it to you. And so now you have that. So now let's go back to our final portion, which we have about maybe 20-something minutes to go, and we won't use all of that. So I'm going to provide you with a video, and I'm going to disconnect my headphones because you'll be able to hear it better. Okay, so now you should be able to hear it much better when I put this up. Okay, it's about 7 minutes long, 7.5 minutes long.
So you do not need a 2-year degree or any experience. High school is sufficient.
Yes.
Okay.
And then once you get hired, you'll have to pass the physical exam, drug testing, TB testing, and then once you pass all that, 6 weeks of the academy, first year appointments probation.
Okay, so lots of training that goes along, on-the-job training that goes along with this.
Yeah, the vast majority of that first 6 weeks is on the job, and then after that, you start off on the job. Yeah.
Okay, so if I were hired as a correctional officer, is there a typical day, or what would my day look like?
Well, you drive to work, pick up your radio, your keys, put on, everybody has to wear utility belt, minimum cuffs. Report your boss, work anywhere from delivery units, call center, supervising, there's a lot of posted officers. Yeah, every day is a lot of observation. It seems to be boring at times, but that can escalate to 30 wild time in a split second. A lot of our situations, such as dealing with officer presence, communication skills, verbal directives, or glance at them, that doesn't work. Unfortunately, take all hands-on, chemical interviews, whatever it might be. It's not as common. They might just quite regular with a lot of compatibility issues, getting distorted, just ongoing.
So you mentioned that you were the intake facility. So do you classify inmates? Can you talk about that and what level of security is this institution?
Facilities, when they come to our facility, they're seen right in the area of the fingerprint, ask a series of questions, take pictures of them, see officers right away, and provide experience. But we spend about 30 days in there. They go to orientation. There's full paper there, and then they're seen by health service, psychology, alcohol, drug assessment, teaching, testing. A lot of things going on. Within the 14 days, first 14 days of the case manager should enter data relevant to their classification score. Yeah, their classification score is a number. It's factors of current criminal conviction. That is, past criminal history in the last 10 years, your behavior in prison in the last 5 years, and there are blocks in the classification. For instance, if you have late developed parole, not go full level 1, but matter and that. So in 28 to 45 days of classification officer, your behavior score and that point by classification, there's a number of factors for the facility. It's not uncommon for us to get 40 minutes.
So the intake part doesn't happen in a day or two. It actually takes a few weeks.
They come to eat all the drums, and approximately the first 30 days, and sometimes they can transfer right to the house. Probably in about 2 weeks, they're done with most of all their assessments and testing and stuff like that.
We talked about a lot of things that a correctional officer might do. And in our text, we talked a lot about you have advice for students today who are interested in going into this field?
Yeah, most people are corrections officers, good observers, good communicators, have good de-escalation skills. So people are incarcerated with their beings, treating them such as long as that's when they can have time to de-escalate beyond that next situation. Those are the people that are most successful. Like I said, there are a lot of rewards as far as dealing with people and sometimes you get into different situations. But keep in mind, you go from very boring and complacent to very exciting in split seconds. So there's a lot of different things out here. Really,
Okay, well, that's it for that. I'm not really that happy about the volume I could hear on this end. I'm going to find out why the volume, I can't get it to go up. I don't know how it's going to turn out on the recording. But that individual talked about a number of things, and you can listen to those by playing back them yourself. But the point of the matter is that it's important for you to understand that there is firm, fair, and consistent treatment is one of the critical issues that they talked about. And so you find yourself in a situation where an individual has to not be shown favoritism. Talks about now the change in movement in terms of moving from high school to now looking to hire more educated individuals in those roles, in those positions. So it's important for you to be able to take a look at those. And like I said again, I'm kind of trying to figure out why I can't get a louder audio. Maybe if the sounds are up, the speakers, you know. So the speakers are up as well. So anyway, that's just so I might have to unclick this one. We'll see what happens. Okay. I guess that's about it for today. And I want to thank you for listening to this session. I'm going to say good night, and again, you will get this recording very soon. Okay, I'm going to end this session. Good night.